Welcome to the debate. You know, if you walked into a modern nuclear power plant today, you wouldn't mistake it for a cemetery.
No, definitely not.
Right, because the pipes, the cooling towers, the radiation shielding, it's all an architecture of pure, unadulterated utility. Form follows function. But if you walk into a medieval cathedral, the architecture tells you exactly how to feel. The soaring vaulted ceilings, the stained glass, they're designed to inspire this sense of divine awe. The space is a monument to theology.
It's built for the spirit, not the body.
Exactly. So what happens when we stand before a structure that seems to speak both of these architectural languages simultaneously?
Well, it creates the absolute definition of a structural paradox. And I think the closer you look at the engineering tolerances, the more the traditional historical narrative just completely begins to fray at the edges.
Which brings us to our topic today, the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is, frankly, the definitive architectural and historical mystery of our world. We are asking a central question. Was this monumental structure built strictly as a tomb for a pharaoh, basically the ultimate manifestation of a theology of the dead, or was it, an ancient, highly advanced power plant?
And we're going to be drawing on a wealth of source material for this. Everything from recent archaeological excavation records and paleopathology right up to structural chemical analyses and modern engineering audits.
Right. And I will be arguing from the perspective of a traditional archaeologist. When I look at the Great Pyramid, I see the ultimate monument to the Old Kingdom's fourth dynasty. A structure built through a massive, brilliant, but entirely human logistical effort.
And I'll be coming at this from the perspective of a modern engineer. Because when you evaluate the Great Pyramid, not as a cultural artifact, but as a literal blueprint of mechanical metrology, the tomb theory simply cannot account for the physical evidence left in the stone. From the micro-level precision of its internal chambers to the chemical signatures found inside, I'm going to argue that we are looking at a functional energy-producing machine.
Okay, well, let me lay the traditional archaeological foundation first, because we need context. The Great Pyramid is the crowning achievement of Pharaoh Khufu, built around 2560 BCE. And the beauty of modern archaeology is that we don't really have to guess how they organized this massive undertaking anymore.
You're talking about the papyrus finds.
Yes, exactly. We have hard physical evidence. The Diary of Mer, which is this ancient logbook discovered at Wadi al-Jarf, it explicitly details the maritime logistics. It literally documents the daily transport of limestone blocks from the quarries of Torah right down the Nile to Giza. And we've excavated the worker settlements. We know these weren't slaves. They were highly skilled, well-fed laborers, part of a total state economy that was entirely dedicated to achieving structural immortality for their king.
Look, I don't dispute that there was a massive workforce at Giza. Obviously there was. Or that they moved a lot of limestone. But the sheer mechanical reality of the inner chambers, it tells a completely different story.
You mean the granite in the king's chamber?
Yeah, the lifting of the heavy granite, for one.
But see, modern architectural modeling, specifically Jean-Pierre Houdin's internal spiral ramp theory, it provides a brilliant, purely human mechanical solution for raising those 80-ton stones. They used arsenical copper chisels, dolerite pounders, and corundum sand abrasion. It was a triumph of human logistics. They used friction, buoyancy, and frankly, sheer willpower.
Okay, I hear you on the logistics of moving limestone. I really do. But you are skipping right over the architectural layout and the extreme precision of that inner core. Have you considered that the internal layout of the Great Pyramid serves absolutely no logical burial function?
How so? It's a series of protective chambers.
No. Look at the descending passage. It is over 300 feet long, carved down through solid bedrock, and it is perfectly straight to within 1/50th of an inch.
Right, it's incredibly precise.
That is the thickness of a thumbnail over the length of a football field. You simply do not need that level of optical tolerance to slide a wooden coffin underground. It's over-engineering to an absurd degree if it's just a tomb.
So how do you interpret that precision, if not as religious devotion?
I look at Christopher Dunn's Giza power plant hypothesis. He proposes the pyramid was designed as a coupled oscillator.
Wait, let's break that down for a second for everyone. A coupled oscillator. You mean, like pushing a child on a swing, where if you push at the exact right moment, matching the swing's natural rhythm, the energy amplifies and the swing goes higher?
Precisely, yes. In this framework, the Great Pyramid was designed to push and capture the Earth's natural seismic frequencies. The entire structure was built to convert those earthly vibrations into airborne sound and ultimately into microwave energy.
Microwave energy? Okay.
Yes, the Grand Gallery, with its heavily corrugated stepped ceiling, it wasn't some grand processional route for priests in robes. It was a housing for a bank of acoustic resonators, designed to amplify sound. And the king's chamber, which is made entirely of quartz-rich granite, was the microwave resonator cavity. Every shaft, every angle was designed to capture, amplify, and distribute power.
Okay, I see the appeal of looking at those tight tolerances and assuming it must require an industrial purpose. You're looking at the mechanical metrology, those 80-ton granite beams, the perfectly flat surfaces, and you're concluding, well, it must be a machine built with advanced power tools. But to do that, you have to completely ignore the evolutionary timeline of Egyptian construction.
How am I ignoring the timeline?
Because they didn't just wake up one Tuesday and build the Great Pyramid. If you look at the reign of Khufu's father, Sneferu, you see a massive, generations-long trial and error process. I mean, Sneferu built the Medum Pyramid, and its outer casing literally collapsed. Then he built the Bent Pyramid, and the engineers realized halfway up that the angle was too steep and the structural load was failing, so they drastically altered the angle mid-construction.
Yeah, the bent pyramid is a mess structurally.
Exactly. The Great Pyramid isn't some anomaly dropped from the sky. It is the direct culmination of generations of learning from failure.
Okay, I don't deny the evolution of their masonry in broad strokes, but I'm sorry, I just do not buy that sand abrasion and copper saws account for the specific precision we see in the igneous rock artifacts of that era. I mean, look at the purportedly machine-made stone vases found in ancient Egypt, the Duarite and porphyry vessels.
You mean the pre-dynastic and Old Kingdom bowls?
Right. Modern machinists have audited these artifacts. Researchers like Uncharted X have detailed this, and they found them to have micron-level symmetry. We are talking about perfectly circular tube drill marks in materials that are incredibly hard.
And you think that proves they had power tools?
I know how hard it is to cut diorite. Even with our current CNC machines, computerized drills with diamond tips, achieving that level of precision in a fragile, hollowed-out igneous rock without shattering it is incredibly difficult. It strongly suggests a mechanized process. And obviously, if they had power tools, they needed a power source. Ergo, the Great Pyramid is that source.
Let me just stop you right there, because the leap from these stone artifacts are very precise to the Great Pyramid was a microwave power plant it's massive. I call this the cathedral analogy.
The cathedral analogy?
Yeah. When we look at the soaring buttresses of Notre Dame, we don't assume the medieval builders had like anti-gravity lasers to lift the stone, right? We understand that intense spiritual devotion routinely drives human beings to over-engineer well beyond strict utilitarian necessity. The Egyptians worshipped perfection because perfection was divine.
But perfection in engineering usually implies function.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of your power plant theory then. If this was indeed a facility generating microwave energy, where is the distribution network?
What do you mean by distribution network?
I mean, power generation without a transmission grid is technologically completely incongruous. If you generate immense power, you need cables, you need transformers, substations, or at least some localized infrastructure to utilize it. We have excavated the entire Giza Plateau. We've found bakeries, breweries, barracks. We haven't found a single copper wire or ceramic transformer.
Well, you're assuming a transmission grid would look like our modern, Edison-style infrastructure.
What else would it look like?
If they were utilizing airborne acoustic resonance and wireless microwave transmission, which is conceptually similar to what Nikola Tesla attempted at Wardenclyffe Tower in the early 20th century, the atmosphere itself is the grid. You don't need miles of copper wire if you're transmitting energy wirelessly through the ionosphere.
That is incredibly speculative.
But let's move from the how to the what. Because if you want to talk about physical evidence, we really need to address what was actually found inside. If this was just a tomb, where are the bodies?
Oh, come on. The lack of mummies is universally explained by millennia of grave robbing. There's never been an original mummy found in the Great Pyramid because it was literally the biggest, most obvious target for thieves in the ancient world. I mean, there are literal saw marks and pry marks left by looters on the king's chamber sarcophagus. We know they were in there.
Exactly, no bodies. But there was something left behind inside those walls, soaking into the stone itself. Industrial chemicals. And this is a cornerstone of the engineering perspective. If you look at the Queen's chamber, it features these two narrow shafts that don't even reach the outside of the pyramid.
Right, the so-called air shafts.
Yes, but recent chemical analyses, like the research conducted by Brett Cohen, have detailed exactly what was inside them. The southern shaft contained heavy traces of sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and the northern shaft contained a salt mixture of ammonium chloride and zinc chloride.
And you believe these were actively pumped into the chamber?
Yes. When you combine these chemicals or use them in standalone systems within those shafts, you generate hydrogen gas. The Queen's chamber was a massive hydrogen generator. That gas filled the Grand Gallery, was energized by the acoustic resonance of the structure, and then flowed into the king's chamber.
Okay, and how does ambient sound and hydrogen gas somehow create microwave energy?
It all comes down to the piezoelectric properties of the granite in the king's chamber.
Let's clarify that for a moment. Piezoelectricity, that's when certain materials, like the quartz crystals suspended inside granite, generate an electric charge when you apply physical pressure or vibrate them. Is that right?
Exactly right. So the acoustic vibrations of the earth hit the pyramid. They're amplified through the Grand Gallery, and they vibrate the quartz in the king's chamber. That piezoelectric charge interacted with the hydrogen gas, exciting the atoms and emitting a microwave beam out of the pyramid shafts. I mean, this isn't mythology. This is hard chemistry and physics.
I understand the physics you're outlining, but I really have to challenge the literal logistics of this chemical theory. Where is the archaeological evidence for the mass-scale industrial storage and transport of corrosive acids during the Old Kingdom? Well, no, think about it. You're talking about moving massive, continuous quantities of sulfuric acid to keep a power plant running. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Diary of Merer. We have incredibly detailed accounting of sheep, of limestone, of daily bread rations. We have zero records of specialized chemical tankers. We don't even have evidence of the advanced metallurgy required to store highly corrosive acids without them immediately eating through their containers.
Okay, but how else do you explain the environmental anomalies inside the pyramid? Specifically, the absolute lack of soot in the upper chambers.
The lack of soot?
Yes. If thousands of human workers were deep inside this pitch-black structure, carving and placing stones over a 20-year period, they would have needed light. If they used primitive torches, the ceiling should be stained black with carbon. They aren't. There is zero soot. The lighting had to be smokeless, which strongly suggests advanced technology or electricity.
Actually, experimental archaeology has completely solved the sootless ceiling mystery, and it doesn't require electricity. The Egyptians didn't use primitive, smoking wood torches inside. They used high-quality vegetable oil lamps, and they added salt to the wicks.
Wait, salt wicks?
Yes, salt. By adding salt to the oil, they chemically altered the combustion process. It burns away the carbon impurities that normally create black smoke, resulting in this bright, virtually smokeless flame. It leaves no soot on the limestone. It is an elegant, microscopic chemical solution to a macroscopic engineering problem. No light bulbs required.
Okay, that is a very clever workaround for the lighting, I'll admit. But it still doesn't explain the missing core components of the machine itself. You asked earlier about the transmission grid and why the power plant stopped working, implying that if it were a machine, we'd find all its broken parts sitting there. I propose the machine didn't just naturally break down over time. Its central, functional component was deliberately removed.
Okay, let's explore that. What was this core component?
Look at the granite coffer in the king's chamber. You call it a sarcophagus, I call it a housing unit. There is an exact dimensional match between the internal volume of that granite coffer and the biblical Ark of the Covenant, as described in the book of Exodus.
Oh boy. okay.
No, hear me out. The theory is that the Ark was not some magical gold box holding stone tablets, but a highly advanced, removable capacitor or high-energy device. It was literally the spark plug for the Giza power plant.
And what, it just walked away?
It was eventually removed or stolen by figures associated with leader religious texts like Moses. In this view, religious texts are essentially misunderstood technical manuals. When the Bible describes the deadly electrical discharge of the Ark, striking down people who touched it improperly, and outlines its precise housing dimensions, it is describing a piece of extremely volatile active technology taken directly from the pyramid.
I have to issue a very, very firm pushback here on multiple fronts. First, let's look at the literal logistics of that theft. Let's assume you're right and the Ark of the Covenant was a massive, highly radioactive capacitor. How does a nomadic Iron Age tribe physically remove a multi-ton, highly dangerous power core from the center of a sealed, geometric mountain, drag it through the desert, and survive? The logistics of the theft simply don't make any sense.
Because they had instruction manuals, what we now call religious texts.
Which brings me to my second point. Interpreting religious texts as engineering blueprints is like reading poetry as a legal contract. It fundamentally misapprehends the intent, the culture, and the context of the ancient authors. The coffer in the king's chamber matches the dimensions of a human body inside a wooden coffin, which is exactly what it was designed to hold. Furthermore, taking Abrahamic lore from the Iron Age and reverse engineering it into 4th dynasty Egyptian monuments from thousands of years earlier it's historically anachronistic. You are bridging millennia of distinct cultural evolution just to make a puzzle piece fit.
Seeing is just completely wrong. Because this brings us to a really crucial point of the engineering perspective. Why do the Egyptians of the dynastic period seem to regress?
Regress in what way?
Look at the older structures. The Great Pyramid and the Sphinx show vastly superior precision compared to the crumbling mud brick pyramids of the Middle Kingdom. It is a trajectory of decline, not evolution. I argue that the dynastic Egyptians did not build the Great Pyramid. They inherited it.
So you're suggesting a precursor civilization built it?
Exactly. A lost epic of advanced civilization that predated the dynastic Egyptians by thousands of years. We know from modern geological and climatological records that around 12,700 years ago, the Earth experienced the Younger Dryas impact, a cataclysmic event that caused massive global flooding, rapid ice melt, and extreme climate shifts.
The flood myths.
Right. This is exactly why almost every ancient culture on Earth shares a mythology of a great, world-destroying flood. This precursor civilization possessed the high technology to build the Giza power plant using electromagnetism and acoustic levitation. When the cataclysm wiped them out, the technology was lost.
And the dynastic Egyptians just sort of found the pyramid sitting there after the floodwaters receded and claimed it as their own?
Yes, they appropriated it. And because the original technology, things like using acoustic levitation to move an 80-ton block of granite, was so far beyond the comprehension of later recovering cultures, it was written down in their histories as magic. Authors like Nick Redfern have pointed out that local legends attributed the building of the pyramids to jinns, or to supernatural beings, or even extraterrestrials. These aren't just fairy tales. They're the fragmented cultural memories of a lost high technology that looked exactly like magic to primitive survivors.
I understand how seductive that narrative is, I really do, but it relies heavily on the God of the gaps fallacy. Just because we don't currently have every single microscopic detail of how they moved a specific stone does not mean we get to fill that scientific gap with lost Atlanteans, or extraterrestrials, or jinns.
But the gaps in our knowledge are massive. We are talking about lifting 80-ton granite blocks 150 feet inside a confined space.
The structural gaps are massive, yes, but they are not magical. And modern science is actually bridging the gap between the archaeologist and the engineer as we speak. We are actively mapping the internal voids of the pyramid today using muon tomography in the Scan Pyramids project,
which has revealed huge unexplained spaces.
Yes, but let's explain how we found them. Muon tomography uses cosmic rays, specifically heavy electrons called muons that constantly rain down on Earth. They pass through empty space easily, but get absorbed by dense stone. By placing detectors inside the pyramid, we can literally see the shadows of hidden rooms. That is how we recently discovered the North Face corridor and the massive big void above the Grand Gallery. Now, are these voids the remnants of ancient microwave chambers, or are they internal counterweight systems? Temporary staging areas for lifting those massive blocks?
You think they're counterweights.
Very likely the latter. As our own science improves, we are finding structural, architectural answers, not supernatural ones.
Finding a void doesn't prove it was a counterweight system, though. It just proves the structure is infinitely more complex than a solid tomb.
True, but we have to look at the human cost as well. The workers' cemeteries at Giza are filled with the bones of actual people, and when paleopathologists examine those bones, they find severe arthritis, compressed vertebrae, and healed bone fractures. This physical trauma is completely consistent with a lifetime of hauling incredibly heavy stone. These were not magicians using acoustic levitation. They were human beings bleeding, sweating, and dying to build this monument.
The dynastic Egyptians could have been doing massive restorative work. They could have been building the surrounding temples, the causeways, and the smaller subsidiary pyramids, which absolutely show the hallmarks of primitive copper chisel labor and physical strain. But the core of the Great Pyramid, the quartz granite resonance chambers, the micron precision passages, that is a different signature of work entirely. You can have both. A primitive culture trying to emulate, repair, and restore the grand machine of a forgotten era.
I would argue that dividing the Giza Plateau into advanced and primitive zones is an artificial distinction designed purely to protect a fringe theory. The geology of the site itself supports a unified dynastic construction. Recent geological studies show that a now extinct branch of the Nile, the Aramat branch, flowed directly to the Giza Plateau during the Old Kingdom.
Right, the ancient waterways.
Yes, which perfectly aligns with the Diary of Marir. It describes opening dikes and utilizing the seasonal floodwaters to float multi-ton blocks right to the base of the construction site. The environmental logistics perfectly match the archaeology. The Egyptians didn't need anti-gravity. They had water, buoyancy, and sheer human willpower.
And I maintain that willpower alone does not cut granite to optical flatness. Willpower does not tune a room to the exact resonant frequency of hydrogen gas. The Giza Plateau is the geographic center of the Earth's landmass. The pyramid is aligned to true north with a margin of error of just 3/60th of a degree. You're asking me to believe that an agrarian society using plumb bobs and stars achieved a level of geodetic and mechanical perfection that we would struggle to replicate today with lasers and computer-aided design. As an engineer, I have to look at the tolerances, and the tolerances say this was a functional machine.
And as an archaeologist, I look at the context. And the context says this is the magnificent, messy, evolving footprint of human civilization. But we've reached the point where we must look back at the breadth of what we've discussed today. I stand by the overwhelming archaeological consensus. The Great Pyramid is a triumph of 4th Dynasty engineering. It is the result of massive maritime supply chains, a deeply devoted workforce, and an architectural evolution driven by a profound theology of the dead. The chemical traces, the precise alignments, the newly discovered voids, these are the brilliant, naturally explicable features of humans operating at the absolute peak of their era's capabilities.
And I stand by the mechanical reality of the structure, the micron-level precision of the stonework, the highly specific chemical signatures of sulfuric and zinc acids, and the undeniable acoustic properties of the granite chambers strongly suggest we are looking at a repurposed, functional machine. It was a coupled oscillator built by a lost epoch of advanced civilization designed to draw energy from the Earth itself. It's a technological legacy that we are only just now beginning to mathematically comprehend.
Despite our starkly different frameworks, I believe we do find a really powerful point of convergence here. Whether you view it through the lens of a traditional archaeologist studying human culture, or through the eyes of a modern engineer analyzing structural tolerances, the Great Pyramid remains the ultimate benchmark for human ambition on this planet.
Oh, absolutely. And as modern non-destructive technologies like muon imaging allow us to peer through the solid stone into hidden voids, basically bridging the gap between archaeology and engineering, we're both forced to admit that the structure is far more complex than just a simple pile of limestone. The Great Pyramid is not a static relic, it's an active puzzle.
It is indeed. Which brings us back to where we started. When you walk into that monumental space, are you standing in a cathedral of the ancient dead, built by the sweat and devotion of mortals? Or are you standing in the silent, deactivated shell of a machine that once hummed with the energy of the earth? The stones are still there, waiting for us to ask the right questions. The material has many secrets left to reveal, and we leave it to you to form your own conclusion.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us.